Mr. Hendricks, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, we'll go over the process here just real quick so you have an idea of how this process will work here. So number one, first, please feel comfortable. Thank you so much for submitting your application. I know this process might not feel like it's easy, but our job is just to try to find out who the best candidate would be through just a series of questions. But so the way this will work, the first question will be mine, and really it's not a good question. I'll just give you the opportunity to introduce yourself, let us know a little bit about yourself. Once that happens, then we'll just move to Mr. Shaw, and then the series of questions will go for Mr. Shaw, and we'll work down the dice this way. So the questions you'll be asked are the same ones that have been asked of everyone to make that fair, so everybody can be judged accordingly. Some council members have one question, some have, I think, four. So we'll get through them all. 30 minutes is kind of the timeline that was allotted, so just kind of keep your answers succinct, but also make sure you take the time to answer the question thoroughly and the best that you can. So don't be afraid of the time, just be acknowledgeable all the time, okay? So with that said, please introduce yourself, let us know who you are, what you're about, and then we'll move forward with the questions.
I'm Joe Hendricks. I live, obviously, in Ward 3. Actually, I just live down the road. I've actually, occasionally when I come to the council meetings, if it's nice out, I'll walk. So that's always a nice walk. I've lived here since, I always get the dates confused, January 2017. I always get confused which is 16 or 17, but January 2017. I double checked that before I filled all my applications. I live with my wife. Technically it's her house. We never did any of the paperwork when I moved in with her. I didn't see the point. She's not going to kick me out anytime soon.
You hope not, right?
We have 2 young children. One is 2 months and one is going to be 2 years soon, so we're enjoying that most of the time. I'm interested, obviously, in the Ward 3 position. I want to help. I enjoy helping people, and I want to serve my community.
Thank you so much. Mr. Shaw.
Thank you. Before I get into it, it's quite interesting you bring up the fact, your wife's name's on the house. I drive a car that's not even in my name, so I understand. So real quick, I have 4 questions I'm going to go through with you. The last 3 candidates have received the same 4 questions. At any point in time, if you need me to clarify or restate or you don't understand the question, don't hesitate to ask.
Okay.
Thank you so much for your time here tonight. First question, if you received a $1 million grant for use within the city, how would you use it and what would you do?
I'm assuming no strings are attached for this grant. No strings. Who did it come from? I'm a little concerned where this $1 million just popped up. I don't want to get any corruption charges for taking $1 million I shouldn't. If it's from a legitimate source, a legal, ethical source, I might put a study on how to improve some of the traffic over on Troy 202. Especially, the worst part of the traffic isn't so much the traffic, it's the number of accidents I've seen at Troy and Taylorsville, which being stuck in traffic is not good, but getting in an accident, that's completely another level of being stuck in traffic.
Mr. Hendricks, before tonight, did I share with you any of my questions?
No, but I did hear a little bit.
Okay. Well, then this next question is going to be quite interesting for you then. Some people in our community believe that we have a serious traffic problem. Mm-hmm. With the announcements of Starbucks and the future development of the former Swan Lake property. A, do you agree that we have that traffic problem? And 2, how would you mitigate those concerns or change the situation?
Well, I definitely agree, especially the evidence of the accidents is definitely a strong evidence that there's a traffic problem other than just people being simply annoyed by normal traffic. Swan Lake, I think that's going to be interesting. That might actually improve the traffic depending on how many extra ways there are to go in and out of that place. I'm not an expert on traffic, but it may. Starbucks in the old, PNC Bank building, I honestly thought that it would have looked better at the next to Chipotle where there's a pool place that's not there anymore, but they decided to go with the PNC building, or what was or will be. Then there's, I'll keep calling it Chipotle, the chicken place.
Raising Cane's.
No, the other chicken place.
Chick-fil-A.
Chick-fil-A. I almost think, the way I've seen Chick-fil-A direct traffic around their buildings, maybe they should get onto it too and direct the traffic. But I don't know if they really can do that.
Okay.
That's only a kind of a joke, but.
My third question, do you believe city council members should have term limits?
That's a hard one, because when I look at like senators in the U.S. and people like that, that's a very competitive, and so definitely I think there should be term limits there. But when you get to city council and other local positions, a lot of times they're very uncompetitive. A lot of you, I believe, last time when you ran unopposed. So if there were term limits, would nobody have ran for those positions, or would somebody have stepped up? So on the one hand, I do want to see, probably want to see people in their positions, so I don't know if we'd want to leave positions vacant. And term limits might make vacancies, but then again, it also might make people step up. At this point, I would say no term limits, because I'm too concerned that not enough people would step up. There's been plenty of elections where I've seen where the ballot will say vote for exactly 2 people, but only 1 person is running. So my concern is nobody would run for a position and we'd have vacancies if we had term limits.
Interesting, okay. Last question. In 2019, Ohio's medical marijuana industry pulled in nearly $60 million in its first year of sales. Would you support a measure to overturn the city's current medical marijuana ban in an attempt to capture this revenue in our community?
Well, it's interesting. If we're only concerned about revenue and not about whether or not medical marijuana would help people, that's a little concerning to me. If I think, I'm not a doctor, but if a doctor thinks medical marijuana or medical anything can help somebody, why are we as politicians saying, no, we think it's wrong that you should not be able to be helped by a medicine just because of the history of that medicine in our country?
Thank you so much for the responses you provided here, honestly. And Mr. Mayor, that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Shaw. Mr. Campbell?
Good evening. Thanks for coming out tonight. My question's regarding public safety, police and fire. What's your opinion? Do you feel that the city's provided an adequate level of protection, and do you feel safe in the city?
Well, I definitely feel safe, but maybe that's just because I'm a tall white guy, so I don't have anybody targeting me. I'd be interested to see if some of the minorities in our community, do they feel safe by our police? I know some communities, we actually live in an area where that's not a lot compared to other areas of the country, don't feel safe with the police. I'd be interested to see, do they feel safe with our police department? One thing, though, on Facebook, people complain a lot on Facebook. I'm not saying I've never seen, but I don't remember anybody ever complaining about the fire or the police department, so that's a good thing. It's one of those things where if they're doing their job right, nobody's going to notice, which is kind of, probably frustrating for them at times, but.
My next and final question is in regard to redevelopment. The city of Heber Heights has announced recently the purchase and the redevelopment of a shopping center on Brant Pike near Fishburg Road. Mm-hmm. What are your thoughts on redevelopment, maybe that project specifically, but just in general, redeveloping the older portions of the city?
Well, I would prefer to see private industry or private individuals do the redevelopment rather than the city itself. I could see, of course, maybe there might be times where the city has to step in, and they should do that reluctantly. I would like to see people in that redevelopment area, what do they think? I remember I was at a council meeting last time, and a business owner maybe said the first she heard of that redevelopment was on the newspaper. I mean, maybe that was her own fault for not paying attention to council meetings, but then again, maybe the city should have reached out to those business members more beforehand.
Thank you so much for coming out.
Thank you.
Mrs. Birch?
Yes, thank you for applying. On that same note, understanding that it is, that a lot of those strip malls are owned by private individuals, how would you encourage them to clean up their property and to make them more market ready so that more businesses would come in?
Well, I would prefer positive encouragement. Maybe tax breaks is one way I can think of. Paying them, I don't know if I'd like that too much because that would come direct from the taxpayer, although I guess some people would argue that tax breaks were not some people would like to say enforcing zoning laws, although sometimes that gets me a little nervous that we're going to be punishing people unfairly. But that's one way that a lot of cities will do it. They'll find any zoning laws that they may be breaking and enforcing those.
Okay, I don't think we do illegal code enforcement here.
Well, yeah, I didn't think so either, but sometimes you might, well, I don't know, sometimes cities might do it legally, but not ethically, if that makes any sense.
Well, okay,
I'm not saying Heber Heights does, I'm just saying cities in
no.
general. might.
What about the homes in Ward 3? What do you think about making homeowners or property owners accountable for their property?
I would like to see them encouraged to be morally rather than legally responsible for keeping up with their neighbors. If their neighbor's lawn is getting overgrown, instead of calling up the city and saying, hey, my neighbor's lawn is getting overgrown, can you send somebody out here to mow it? Maybe they should say, hey, I'm the one that noticed it. Maybe I'll go knock on my neighbor's door and say, hey, can I mow your lawn? Can maybe the next door neighbor has, on the other side of me, has a teenager. I could say, hey, can their teenager mow your lawn? Obviously, I don't want to talk to the teenager parents first and not just offer it, but.
Okay. And we have, as you know, we have a lot of, several really good amenities here in the city that draw people here. Is there, would you make any personal recommendations on what you might want to see the city bring in here that could further draw businesses or residents to come to our city?
That's something I haven't thought a lot of. Trying to think of something we don't. We have a movie theater. We have the Rose. We have a lot of restaurants. Some really good ones. We have both chain and local. We have some good parks. We got the dog park. What do we not have?
Well, if there's no answer there, I mean, if there's nothing you can think of, that's okay.
I'm sure there is, and I'm sure the community, somebody in the community, many people have many ideas, but I'm at a loss for something that we don't already have.
Well, that's just fine. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Mr. Otto.
All right. Mr. Hendricks, thank you so much for coming out tonight. Like everyone else, I appreciate your interest in
Thank
getting
you.
involved and applying. I have two quick questions. They're very 5,000 foot. The first one is, in your opinion, what is our city or our community's greatest weakness?
We don't have a downtown. In fact, we don't even have a main street. I actually was looking at, was Googling like how to become a council member before here, seeing what kind of questions they ask, and someplace was talking about, well, what about the communities downtown that are Main Street? We don't have a main street. Now, we do have 201 and 202, but we don't really have a downtown like some communities have, where they have First Fridays and things such as that. So that would be our weaknesses, that we just don't have a downtown.
Fair enough. And on the flip side of that coin, what would you say is our community or our city's greatest strength?
We're on 70. That gives us a lot of pass-through business of people stopping by for a restaurant, a bite to eat, or for gas. We get a lot of business on right up against 70. You see that it encourages a lot of development right next to 70. So
Location, location, location.
yes.
That is a great strength of ours.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Mr. Lyons.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Hendricks, thank you so much for applying, coming out tonight, and stepping up, trying to help your community. I greatly appreciate it. One quick question. The Ward 3 City Council position will be up for election in 2021. That's next year.
Mm-hmm.
If you are appointed by this council, would you seek to run for election in that Ward 3 seat?
Yeah, I was actually, one of the reasons I decided to apply for this was that I was considering it anyway. I probably will, regardless of whether I get appointed or not. Obviously, I have to talk with my wife about it, see what she thinks. I have talked a little bit, but as it gets closer, see where we're at.
And I hope you talked to your wife before you came tonight.
Oh, yes, definitely, definitely.
Thank you, Mayor.
He's going home and she's like, what?
In the meeting right now.
Yeah. Right. Where's the milk?
Well,
Mr. Hill.
As others have said, thank you so much for applying. Really great to see citizens getting involved. I have two questions for you. Mine's more of a 500-foot top-down. The first one is, what is the most important thing that you can think of that is currently affecting just Ward 3?
The only thing I can think of specifically Ward 3, the off-streets seem a little bit worn. I noticed one thing is somewhat off-streets. There's a gate over here behind the apartments. I don't know why there's a gate there that's closed all the time that prevents road. Maybe the community wants it, that's fine, but I do notice that beneath that gate, no cars go on this, of course, because it's a gate. But there's a lot of overgrown grass. So it seems a lot of the roads are just out of repair.
And then my next one is, in conflict, there's always three sides. There's his side and his side, or her side and her side, and then there's the truth. What are ways that you determine the truth?
One way, this isn't always possible, is give it some time. Now, sometimes you don't have time, but a lot of times when you wait, you'll get input from, you say there's the three sides, but you get other third-party input. And so over time, some of the truth will reveal. Now, I guess conversely, over time, sometimes some of the truth can get lost. If something's not recorded, I believe this is recorded, you can easily forget it. People's memory isn't always perfect. Give it some time, get some third-party input, listen, not just listen to respond or to argue back or to prove your point, but listen to understand why do they think what they think? Why are they motivated to do what they do?
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
And Mr. Webb.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Hendricks, thank you for applying. I've got a few questions for you. The first one is, what do you consider the most important attribute or skill set that you would bring to this council?
I have two that are related. One, I try to listen and understand people, probably to a fault. When somebody, if I read something in a crime, I'm like, why did they do that? I mean, I think people have two motivations. They either do what they think is good or they do what they think will benefit them. I don't think anybody goes out there and thinks, what can I do to make this world worse? What can I do to do evil? They may think what is evil is good, and that's why they do evil. Or they may enjoy doing evil things, but they don't do it because it is evil. I also tend to think a lot, so I sometimes overthink, but I like to reflect and try to think multiple positions of an opinion, of a position, multiple positions of a position, multiple viewpoints, multiple angles, multiple solutions. Sometimes I have lots of ideas, but sometimes sometimes I'll have an idea, but I'm like, well, that idea is kind of stupid, but maybe I can.
Sure. Thank you. My next question, just overall, what is the number one issue that you think that the city council faces with the city of Huber Heights? What do you see as the most important issue before us right now?
Short term would probably be, well, I think there's two short-term issues. One is very visible, and one I think is probably invisible, somewhat invisible. I haven't heard anything in a while. The most visible one is the traffic on 202 and accidents. The invisible one, I don't hear much about this. I haven't heard anything about this in a while, but I'm sure it's still a thing, is heroin overdoses and drug overdoses. I haven't heard anything. Maybe people like to keep that quiet. You don't want to talk about that. Long term, I'm seeing a slip away from transparency. Right now, I don't think anybody here is doing anything wrong, but they're just slacking a little bit on the transparency. And that gives the opportunity for, I don't know, malicious actors, somebody who wants to do something that benefits them, or maybe somebody thinks they can do good by doing this bad thing, thinking that the ends justify the means. They might be able to slip through. So we don't want to it's not too bad right now, but it's just starting to be, things aren't being updated. I think actually some of it is actually being improved recently, but that's just off the top of my head.
Thank you. My next question is kind of along the same lines. Taking a look at where we are now, where do you see Huber Heights in, let's say, 3-4 years down the road?
It's going to be really interesting. I think the most interesting thing is the Swan Lakes redevelopment. I think that's probably going to have the most major change. I don't know if that'll take 3 years to build. I don't know how long constructions take and to fill the vacancies. That is going to be probably the most significant thing that affects Huber Heights, at least visibly. It'll be interesting also to see, well, we got the census this year, see how that affects any federal funding. That's going to definitely affect us in the next 3 years in any redistricting.
Thank you. And then finally, it's not an easy thing to do, get up here in front of, well, these guys, but to get up here in front and apply for this. So what was your motivation? What made you want to apply for the council seat?
I've always had an interest in politics, or at least not like office type politics where you caddy with each other, but politics where you try and help people either get government so that it's not so much threatening them or make it so that anything about it is helpful to the people. I like helping people for some reason. I don't know entirely why. I mean, I'll be the person, if you ask me something at the grocery store, like, do you know where this is in the grocery store? I'll be like, yeah, and I'll lead you to it, even though I don't work there. I think I have been confused for employees before, like Home Depot, when I help somebody find something, but
That's not a bad thing. Thank you, sir. I appreciate it.
thank you.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Hendricks. So to wrap up, is there anything that you'd like us to know about you that didn't come out, or you have the opportunity to tell us through the question and answer session, and then just kind of wrap up? And
No, I appreciate the opportunity. I look forward to seeing what Huber Heights has to offer.
okay, thank you so much. Again, thank you. Appreciate your time, and thanks for the application. We appreciate you coming and doing this.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so at this time, I would ask for a motion to convene to an executive session so we can begin the discussions on the personnel matters.
It would be to convene executive session to consider personnel matters related to appointment of a public official.
Mrs. Burge?
I move.
Okay, thank you. Is there a second? Mr. Hill?
Second?
Motion and a second. Mr. Rogers?
Mr. Campbell.
Yes.
Mrs. Burge.
Yes.
Mr. Otto. Yes. Mr. Lyons.
Yes.
Mr. Hill.
Yes.
Mr. Webb.
Yes.
Mr. Shaw.
No.
Okay, motion carries 6 to 1. So at this time, it's 9:14.